conundrum. And I would like to hear the views of the panel. How do you see the role of the United Nations in all this? Michel, would you like to perhaps start?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Andras, for this introduction, because in a sense, you have made a number of points that I wanted to make at the beginning of my introduction. Water, and I think this is the reason why we are all here, is a cross-cutting issue. It's cutting across so many socio-economic sectors, so many things that it is indeed a very complex issue, and as was mentioned by the agent provocateur, as you called yourself, even at the national level, countries have selected different models to address that issue. At the international level, indeed, many programs, agencies are looking at the water issue from their own perspective. And after having been involved in that for many years, although in some cases it is a weakness, and you have identified a few weaknesses, in many other cases it is actually a strength, because we have complementary approach, and often it is easy to think, oh, coordination is not working well, we should address that problem. But we have to be careful that by solving one problem, we don't create a bigger problem elsewhere. Whatever the governance of the water, as you mentioned, FAO will have to continue to deal with water. 75% of the fresh water is used for agriculture. Whatever happens, WHO will have to look at the water, because malaria is produced by the mosquitoes, because cholera is linked to the quality of water, and so on. As you mentioned, the water, no one owns the water. You may think that this is my water. I'm sorry. The water cycle is such that the water molecules are recycled at great speeds through the atmosphere, the ocean, the river. The only molecule which stay for a long time in the same place are in the underground water table, at least some of them, and through the currents in the ocean, where some of them take thousands of years to complete their movement. So back to the water issue. I think what we have to see is how can we address the most critical boxes where we need to cooperate better with each other. And this is why the UN has put this coordination mechanism called UN Water. It is not, by the way, a new mechanism. It has existed in a different name for many years. And this mechanism actually, I believe, is a success story. It is a success story, but in terms of coordination, it is, if you ask the question, and your question reflects the view of many people, it has not been a success story in terms of communication, because this message is not getting through. Let me go back, if you allow me, Andras, and forgive me, because I apologize to you for coming late into this debate. I was in some other disaster reduction, and water management is key when it comes to disaster reduction. Now, water for a long time was, and as you mentioned, was considered at a basin level, either national basin, regional basin, or even shared across a few countries. The climate is changing that. Now we need to look at the water from a global perspective. Everything is interacting with everything else, and when it comes to climate change, adaptation to climate change, we need to consider the global problem. Let me just take you one little example which is probably fresh in your memory. Just a few weeks ago, in this part of Europe, the weather was very cold. People ask the question, how can we have this very cold weather and we talk at the same time about global warming? Now, the scientists Scientists like paradox and challenges, because they like to provide explanation to that. So one of the most likely explanation of this, it is not a paradox. What happens, it could well be linked to what happens, the melting of the Arctic ice. The melting of the Arctic ice has an influence on the anticyclone over Siberia. The anticyclone over Siberia has an influence on the snow cover as well. That has an influence on the circulation over Europe, etc. So global warming could well lead to some of these phenomena. It is not a paradox. What it shows is that we need hydrological data like snow cover, but other things, if we want to look at the global climate. So we have identified a number of building blocks where cooperation is absolutely essential. Climate change, adaptation to climate change is definitely one of them, and water is a big component. Disaster reduction is another one. Health is another issue. There's a number of thematic areas where we are really cooperating with each other. When you mentioned 28, 29 agencies, programs involved, yes, but as you say, at the national level, you have many, many institutions involved in water as well. But if you take these thematic things, there are probably only 3 or 4 leading agencies, and we are cooperating very closely with each other to address that. We are producing very concrete outcome. But let me mention something to you. When it comes to making decision in the water sector, infrastructure often are there for decades. They are you invest for very long periods. And you cannot consider that the past is a sufficient indicator for the future because of climate change. So therefore, it's very important to take into account this global information to manage properly the water. It doesn't matter it does matter what the global water governance is, but we need a governance, but the governance that doesn't have to be a centralized governance, it can be a decentralized government, provided you have the right coordination mechanism. But one of the major problems is that many countries don't have even the basic information to manage water resources. I've been visiting personally many countries. I can tell you I've visited too many countries where the water, the hydrological infrastructure is not only insufficient, is essentially non-existent. I've visited more than one country where there's not even a single rain gauge in the country. So how can you manage water if you don't even know about the situation? So this is something that we are also addressing in the UN system, and I think it is a top priority. So we are developing, for example, in the area of climate, together with all our partners, all the one you have mentioned, Andras, a global framework for climate services. You are negotiating, for example, under the framework of the United Framework Convention on Climate Change. But this negotiation need to be informed by the best possible science, by the best possible information. You cannot manage what is not measured, what is not observed. And this information is not sufficient. So the UN system is very, very active on all these fronts, and the UN system is delivering a lot more than what many people believe. But I take the message very close to my heart. Obviously, our message is not getting through. At the same time, I don't want to paint a rosy picture, because the picture is not rosy. A lot is being done, but a lot more needs to be done, and we are aware of that. And but we need to work very, very closely between the system and you, our member states.
So perhaps it may not be a winner idea to have one single agency, whether an existing one or a new one, that would be the lead, because it is such a complex picture. There are so many interests to reconcile. But perhaps, again, learning about and perhaps capitalizing on the great success what the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has achieved, the IPCC, not only the Nobel Prize and, great press. The IPCC has great press. Whenever the IPCC report is off the press, everybody is running to read it. Well, yet at the same time, if you ask yourself the question, what will happen with the climate variability and change? How will it manifest? Most likely you come to the conclusion that water is the principal vector of all the impacts, or most of the impacts of climate change through a changing hydrological cycle. Whether you talk about increased sea level rises, or you talk about an increased frequency of floods, or an increased frequency and extension of droughts, it is water that carries those impacts. So perhaps, but that's the quote-unquote disaster and environment aspect, which IPCC is very strongly, obviously, emphasizing. But there are other aspects as well. So perhaps to create an intergovernmental panel on water, which was mentioned 10 years ago. In those days, I was chairing this committee, the predecessor of UN Water, and there was a very heated discussion whether should we have an intergovernmental panel on water. And I remember your predecessor was very strongly advocating that at UNESCO. We were also for it because we need a body that brings together the various aspects. We need a forum whereby governments are able to change views. Unfortunately, and I speak here as an agent provocateur, unfortunately the Commission on Sustainable Development was not able to mainstream water, never. There was economic issues, social issues, which are two very important components of sustainable development. But water was not there. Perhaps, Vincente, you may have a different view on that, please.
Eu penso que essa discussão nos remete, em algum momento, eu não gostaria que essa sessão se encerrasse sem que a gente pudesse discutir a Rio+20 e a água na Rio+20. Existem hoje, em função dessa análise com o que você já mencionou, existem 4 propostas, de uma maneira geral, para tratar do tema da água. A primeira é um organismo próprio, único. Uma segunda proposta é de que a água esteja inserida dentro da criação do novo Conselho de Desenvolvimento Social no âmbito da ONU. A terceira é o fortalecimento do PNUMA, inclusive foi apresentado e defendido pelo primeiro-ministro da França no momento da abertura. E uma quarta proposta, que aqui está sendo comentada, é de juntar água e clima. Eu penso que juntar água e clima é, na minha opinião, a pior delas. A água viveu muito tempo na casa da agricultura, depois ela mudou para a casa da energia, depois a água mudou para a casa do meio ambiente e está na hora da água ter a sua própria casa. Eu penso que, até para uma contribuição de uma compreensão melhor a respeito das mudanças no clima global, eu penso que a água precisa de uma identidade própria. Particularmente, e aí a minha apreensão de que nós pudéssemos aqui, pelo menos, orientar algumas propostas, porque as decisões serão tomadas na Rio+20, e esse fórum vai ou não apresentar alguma orientação, porque se nós não apresentarmos, a decisão será tomada, independentemente da nossa posição. Eu penso, e aí coerente com a posição do meu governo, do governo do Brasil, de que, uma vez que o problema da crise não é apenas da água, da representação da água, não existe apenas uma crise na representação da água, mas existe também uma crise dentro da própria ONU, de que a proposta que seria mais ousada nesse momento seria a de colocar a água dentro da proposta brasileira do Conselho de Desenvolvimento Social, mais do que tentar ou criar uma agência específica, que teria aí um grande desgaste de montagem e dificuldade, no meu ponto de vista, ou a da reforma do PNUMA, que também é uma proposta bastante atrativa, mas, do nosso ponto de vista, o mais adequado seria a constituição de um Conselho de Desenvolvimento primeiro nível no âmbito da ONU, e aí sim, dentro dessa reforma geral no âmbito da ONU, situar a água com uma identidade bastante própria. Perdão, Conselho de Desenvolvimento Sustentável, a correção feita aqui.
Thank you very much. Any views by Francisco, please? Yeah.
Well, I agree that definitely we need a global agenda for water and some means of implementation and some means of monitoring and verifying how we are proceeding with that agenda. How it should be organized at an institutional level, I have some hesitation. For me, it's not sure. There is all this trend to create an environmental agency. Should water be in there or not? Of course, water is part of the environment, I think is the most important part of the environment. But water have some specificities that sometimes become hidden when you just think it as part of the environment. Water is extremely important for development. There's the proactive action of using water for energy, for food production, that goes much beyond environmental concerns. So water is also tricky and difficult to tackle because of that. Now, coming back to this argument of having many agencies in the United Nations system dealing with water, I fully agree that that's richness, that creates value, that brings us different angles, and more than that, is unavoidable, inescapable, because water is a little bit full of that. I mean, even if we create an agency, a world agency for water, and that would be the extreme solution, maybe a little bit too early for that. Maybe the Brazilian proposal is more realistic. But if we created that agency, nobody can imagine that, how do you call it, FAO wouldn't deal with water, or UNDP wouldn't deal with water, or the World Bank wouldn't be concerned with water, etc., or World Health Organization and all the others. Of course, they would keep dealing with water, and they should keep dealing with water. So the creation of an agency does not exclude the others, and it should be seen, as Mr. Jarreau said, it should be seen as something that is typical, is characteristic of water. All these angles, it cuts across everything. And so all those angles should express their views, and they are not antagonistic from one from the other. On the other side, we should try to reconcile them and to find a way of reconciling them. So, regardless of the institutional setup, what I think at this stage, 2012, global water governance should be is basically an agenda, a very clear-cut agenda for water, setting world goals that can be understood and complied by all, and that agenda should be verifiable, monitored. That's the key element, I think. So it's far away from the idea that governance or world governance should be a world government. It's not at all. I mean, that's absolutely unrealistic. At most, or at the maximum, global governance should be a governance of governances, saying what the multiple governances, a little bit everywhere, national, transboundary, whatever, should be worried with, and what is the path they should, undertake, and goals they should achieve. So that's the idea of a global water governance for me.
Thank you. Wim, would you like to share your thoughts with the audience?
Well, I agree on this. I think it's very important to keep water on the place where it belongs in the different sectors. I think it's the best solution you can get is to find a way of organizing it on a horizontal way, but give this horizontal a kind of program. Give this leader of this horizontal program a position. Link it to the highest authority. That is my advice and the experience also in the Netherlands and elsewhere. So it is a way you organize it. You can organize it horizontal. You have to do it, I think, with this team. Give it an own position as a team, what's very important, but link it on a higher level. That's an advice. But next to that, I agree with what Francisco said before. You know, mitigation is a global issue. But adaptation starts on a local level. As I said to you, as I showed you for the Netherlands. And then the next level is our river basins. And then the next level is, well, what the Secretary General from OECD, Gurria, said in the plenary. You have different levels of coordination. And you have to find out how you tackle these levels. In the United States, with the Mississippi, they have a big problem because they have different states. And when I visit New Orleans, Louisiana, they asked me, how do you work in Europe on these river basins? And I said, well, with treaties and commissions. And it works for a long time already this way. Treaties, not the United States, between states. So every country, every authority, every government has to find his own solution for cross-border problems with water. And again, I give you the advice, see both sides, the water security and the water supply. They are both on the same, it's the same water. And this is needed in the integral approach. In Europe, we have drought, and we need to work together with our neighbors on the supply of water. And in wintertime, we have floods. So it's the same water. And you have to see this in an integral way. And, well, and then on the global level, I really think be helpful to each other. Research, education is very important. Data are very important. But it's more service for people to do their work on a local, regional, national, supranational level. So don't make it too difficult.
Mm-hmm. Well, some are saying that waters are essentially social issues, that is the social and political issues. The others are saying that water is, of course, an environmental issue because of the ecosystem services.